I bought a house without telling my parents, then found out they planned for my sister's whole family to move in with me for free. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Liv Harper, 27, independent, and I had finally saved enough to buy my own little place in a quiet suburb. I wanted a fresh start, a space that was truly mine, away from my parents' constant interference. I kept it a secret because I knew my parents, Dana and George, loved controlling everything, and my younger sister Mara always expected life to hand her what she wanted. A few weeks after moving in, Mara called, saying she wanted to visit. She showed up with her husband Jace and their 2 kids, Finn and Lila. I was happy at first, until she casually mentioned that Mom and Dad thought it would be great if we all stayed together, permanently. I froze. Betrayal hit me hard. I confronted my parents, and Dana said it was family helping family, while George dismissed my feelings entirely. I realized I had to protect my home. I set small rules, pretending I was accommodating, while quietly making life difficult for Mara and her family, rearranging furniture, limiting space, and subtly enforcing schedules. I also let my parents see the chaos without revealing my strategy. Eventually, I got a lawyer friend to create a formal agreement making their stay temporary. Mara was furious but powerless. My parents slowly began to see I wasn't a child anymore, and Mara had to respect my rules. I finally felt free, proud of standing up for myself, and my house became my sanctuary at last. My parents, Dana and George Harper, have always treated family decisions like their personal business. Every choice I made, from jobs to vacations, was questioned or redirected. The idea of having a space that was truly mine felt almost impossible, but I couldn't ignore the urge any longer. I found a small house tucked in a quiet street, modest but perfect for the independence I craved. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Mara. Keeping it a secret made every step feel thrilling and terrifying at the same time. Each call to the real estate agent, every signed form, every deposit felt like I was stealing a piece of freedom that had always been just out of reach. I worried they'd find out, imagining Dana lecturing me or George insisting it was irresponsible, but the thought of living on my own outweighed the fear. Packing my boxes was a strange mix of emotions. I laughed at little things, like finding just the right corner for my books, and cried over leaving behind memories tied to my old room. There was guilt too, guilt that I was keeping something this big from my family, who had always believed they knew what was best for me. Yet excitement kept bubbling up, a quiet joy I hadn't felt in years. I mapped out every detail of the move, down to where each piece of furniture would go. I imagined waking up in my own space, making my own rules, choosing how I spent my days. The thought of walking through my front door and knowing it was mine, just mine, was intoxicating. For the first time, I felt like I was making a choice entirely for myself, and it filled me with a sense of freedom I didn't want to lose. One afternoon, my phone rang, and it was Mara. She said she wanted to come by for a visit. I felt a rush of happiness. I hadn't seen her in a while, and I imagined a quiet day together, catching up and showing her the little touches I'd made in the house. She didn't come alone. A few hours later, Mara arrived with Jace and their 2 kids, Finn and Lila. They spilled into the living room like a whirlwind, dropping bags, backpacks, and toys everywhere. The kids ran around, laughing and shouting, while Mara chatted endlessly about her plans and her new job. At first, I tried to focus on the excitement, welcoming them, and showing them the rooms. But there was something in Mara's voice that didn't feel right. It was too smooth, almost rehearsed, like she was testing how I would react rather than genuinely catching up. Every sentence seemed calculated, every compliment carefully measured. I felt a chill despite the warmth of the day, a tiny alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind. I smiled, masking my unease, pretending everything was normal. I asked about the kids and Jace's work, laughing at their jokes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Mara's visit wasn't just casual. There was a subtle pressure in the way she looked around my home, lingering on spaces I had worked hard to organize. Her questions felt probing, not curious, as if she were sizing up the house and, somehow, me. By the end of the afternoon, I was exhausted, not from the energy of the kids, but from the tension I couldn't place. Something in Mara's visit felt different, almost like a warning. I couldn't tell yet what was coming, but deep down, I sensed that this wasn't just a simple family visit. As we were sitting in the living room, Mara leaned back and said something that made my chest tighten instantly. She casually mentioned, "Mom and Dad thought it'd be great if we all stayed at your new place, for a while, permanently." I froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart pounded, and a wave of disbelief washed over me. I had worked so hard to have this space, to finally breathe without someone constantly hovering over my life, and now it felt like all of that effort was being ignored, as if my independence meant nothing. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "Wait, what do you mean permanently? How long have they been planning this?" I asked, my mind racing. I wanted answers, clarity, something that would make this nightmare feel less real. Mara shrugged, almost nonchalantly, like it was no big deal. She said it had been their idea for a while, but she didn't know all the details. My chest tightened further. Shock gave way to anger. How could they even think it was okay to impose on me like this? How could they plan such a thing without even asking? I tried to control my expression, hiding the storm brewing inside. I wanted to stay calm, to not give Mara the satisfaction of seeing me unravel, but every word she spoke felt like another punch. I realized this wasn't just about the house, it was about control, about ignoring my choices, about dismissing the very thing I had fought so hard to achieve. I knew in that moment that I couldn't let this slide. I needed to think fast, to figure out how to protect what was mine without losing my temper. Betrayal had never felt so sharp, so personal, and it left me staring at Mara, trying to measure just how much I could trust her, or anyone in that family, ever again. I couldn't let it go. My hand shook as I dialed my parents' number, the phone feeling heavier than usual in my grip. When Dana picked up, I tried to stay composed, but my voice betrayed the tension I felt. "Why would you even think it's okay to plan this without asking me?" I demanded. Dana's reply was calm, almost rehearsed. "Liv, it's not about taking over your space. We're just helping family. You know how important it is for everyone to stick together." Her words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Helping family? It didn't feel like help, it felt like control, like my efforts and independence meant nothing to them. When George got on the line, I tried to explain how I felt, but he waved it off. "It's your duty, Liv. Family looks out for each other, and you know that. You're overreacting." "Duty?" His words made me feel smaller, as if my dreams and boundaries were childish inconveniences. I sank onto the couch, realizing the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't just about Mara or the house, it was about a lifetime of manipulation. Every decision I'd made, every choice I'd been pressured into, suddenly made sense. My parents had always framed their control as love or guidance, but it had been about power all along. Trapped between my anger and my heartbreak, I struggled to respond. I wanted to scream, to demand they see me as an adult, but I also felt a strange clarity. This conversation had exposed the pattern I had been living under for years. I hung up the phone with a heavy heart but also with a flicker of resolve. I couldn't change the past, but I could protect my future. I realized I had to set boundaries, not just for the house, but for my life. The weight of manipulation had been heavy, but for the first time, I felt the determination to stand my ground. After hanging up, I paced around my living room, my mind spinning. I knew I couldn't let them steamroll me. This house was my sanctuary, the one place where I finally felt in control of my life, and I wasn't about to hand it over. The idea of giving in made my blood boil. I decided I needed a plan, quiet, careful, and thorough. I started digging into property laws, looking for clauses about residency and guest limits. I checked subletting rules, homeowners association restrictions, and any loopholes that could protect me without causing a full-blown family disaster. Every document I read fueled my determination. As I scrolled through legal articles and guides, my thoughts drifted to Mara and her family. I imagined them taking over my rooms, spreading into spaces I had painstakingly organized, treating everything as if it wasn't mine. My anger rose, sharp and controlled, like fire ready to ignite. I wanted to hit back, but I didn't want to burn the bridges I still cared about. In the quiet of my new home, I crafted a mental strategy. I would protect my space and assert my authority without losing my composure. I pictured scenarios: Mara pressing her luck, my parents trying to justify their plan, and me standing firm, calm but unwavering. Each imagined confrontation sharpened my resolve. The more I planned, the more clarity I felt. I wasn't helpless or naive, I had options, and I would use them. Revenge didn't need to be cruel, it just needed to be smart. I wanted my family to realize boundaries existed, to understand that my independence wasn't negotiable. By the end of the night, I had a roadmap. I would defend what was mine, silently but decisively. For the first time, I felt a sense of power that didn't depend on anyone else, only on me. One evening, just as I was settling in, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mara standing there, Jace at her side, Finn and Lila bouncing excitedly. She smiled brightly, but there was an edge to it I hadn't noticed before. "We need to stay for a while," she said casually, as if it was perfectly normal. My stomach tightened. I had expected tension eventually, but not like this, not so soon. I took a deep breath and tried to stay composed. I knew I had to assert myself without escalating things too quickly. "Okay," I said slowly, keeping my voice calm. "1 week. After that, we'll reassess the situation." Mara's smile didn't falter, but her eyes glinted with something sharp. She tilted her head slightly, smirking, like she had caught the faintest hint of doubt in my tone. She seemed convinced that I was unsure, that I might cave under the weight of her family's presence. I felt a rush of determination. I wasn't going to let her read me like an open book. I guided them through the rooms, pointing out where they could set up temporarily, all the while mentally noting which areas I would need to protect. Every small decision, from where the kids could sleep to which spaces were off-limits, was a test of my control. As the evening went on, I watched Mara maneuver around the house, subtly trying to stake her claim. Each glance and comment she made was a challenge, but I held my ground, letting her think she was testing me successfully while silently setting the rules. By the end of the night, I knew this week would be a trial. It wasn't just about space, it was about proving that I could stand firm, even when my family tried to push boundaries. I felt the first real spark of confidence in showing that my home was not negotiable. Once Mara and her family settled in, I quietly began making small adjustments around the house. I moved furniture to create tighter spaces, leaving the main living areas slightly cramped. I blocked off rooms under the pretense of repairs or reorganizing, claiming they were off-limits for now. I also started carefully scheduling chores and household tasks. Laundry, dishes, and even bathroom routines were subtly overlapped so that the house felt busier and slightly chaotic. I monitored the water and power usage, overbooking utilities without making it obvious, creating tiny inconveniences that built up over time. Mara started noticing, of course. She complained about the noise, the lack of space, and the confusion over who could use what. "Liv, this is too crowded. Can't we just," she began, but I interrupted softly, giving an apologetic shrug. "I wish I could fix it faster. I don't know why everything feels so hectic." "I'm trying," I said, keeping my voice calm and helpless. Inside, though, I was pleased. Every complaint, every frustrated glance, confirmed that my plan was working. I didn't need to yell, argue, or threaten. The discomfort spoke for itself, and I was already seeing cracks in Mara's confidence. As the days went by, I continued adjusting details, moving rugs, rearranging storage, keeping the family slightly off balance. It wasn't cruel, just enough to remind them that the house had rules and that I controlled them. By the end of the week, Mara was noticeably irritated, her smirk fading slightly. She had started to realize that I wasn't an easy target. Quietly, strategically, I was asserting my authority. Each small move strengthened my position, proving to myself that I could defend my home without causing open conflict, and that my independence wasn't up for negotiation. I realized I needed another layer to protect my home, something beyond rearranging furniture or scheduling chores. I began dropping subtle hints to my parents, carefully mentioning little incidents during casual conversations. The kids got into the pantry again. We might have to toss some food, I said lightly over the phone, letting Dana imagine the chaos. George, predictably, asked more questions, and I replied in passing, "Oh, just some mess here and there, nothing serious." My tone stayed calm, almost indifferent, but the images I painted were enough to make them start worrying. Meanwhile, I let small accidents accumulate naturally. A carpet got stained after Finn spilled juice, a minor appliance stopped working, a shelf got knocked slightly off-center. Nothing that could cause real harm, but enough to hint at disorder. I never overreacted, I simply observed and commented casually, letting the situation seem like a natural consequence of Mara's family moving in. I noticed my parents growing uneasy. Dana called more often, asking if everything was under control, while George's questions carried a note of concern I hadn't heard in years. Mara, blissfully unaware, continued acting as if she was in charge, giving me the perfect cover to appear neutral while letting the pressure build around her. Each day, the tension grew. Mara's irritation became more obvious, her cheerful facade cracking whenever something minor went wrong. Yet I maintained my calm, never giving her a reason to directly challenge me. I let her frustration simmer, knowing the real leverage was mine. By keeping my exterior composed, I silently demonstrated that I was unshakable. The combination of small hints and controlled disruption was working perfectly. My parents began to see that this situation wasn't as simple as they thought, and Mara started feeling the boundaries she had ignored. For the first time, the house was under my control. A few days into their stay, Mara stopped pretending. She began openly challenging me, her voice sharp as she said things like, "I think we should rearrange this room differently," or, "The kids need more space here, so we should move your things." She acted as if my home belonged to her, and every word cut deeper than I expected. I froze for a moment, the shock quickly replaced by a surge of anger. Memories came rushing back, Mara always getting what she wanted growing up, Mom and Dad bending to her whims while my own needs were brushed aside. Birthday presents she coveted magically became hers, family outings were planned around her schedule, and my opinions were often dismissed. I had learned to stay quiet, to smile while being overlooked. Seeing her now, trying to claim my house with that same entitlement, I felt that old frustration flare into determination. I remembered countless times I had been underestimated, told I wasn't capable of making decisions, and yet here I was, standing in the home I had fought to create. I took a deep breath, grounding myself. Mara's words stung, but I refused to let them shake me. I calmly reminded her, "This is my home, and I set the rules. We can work together, but my decisions come first." Her surprise was evident, she hadn't expected resistance. For the first time, she realized that my quiet demeanor didn't mean weakness. I remembered all those moments growing up, times I had been overshadowed, underestimated, or ignored. That history fueled me now, giving me the strength to stand firm. By holding my ground, I felt a sense of liberation. The betrayal of being overlooked my whole life had ended here, in this house. I wasn't just defending a home, I was reclaiming my voice and proving, finally, that I deserved respect. I realized subtlety and strategy weren't enough anymore. I needed a solution that would make my authority impossible to challenge, something official. I reached out to my friend Tess, a lawyer I trusted completely, and explained the situation without sugarcoating it. She immediately understood the stakes and agreed to help. Together, we drafted a formal residency agreement. It outlined the terms clearly, how long Mara and her family could stay, what spaces were off-limits, and what responsibilities they would have. It was professional, binding, and left no room for misinterpretation. I framed it as protecting the house, keeping everything civil, so it wouldn't feel like an attack. When I presented it to Mara, her face twisted into disbelief and anger. "Seriously? You actually made them sign something?" she snapped. Her voice trembled with frustration, but there was nothing she could do legally. Tess had ensured every detail was airtight, leaving Mara no way to argue her case. I stayed calm, letting her fury run its course while keeping my tone neutral. "It's just a formality," I said lightly. "It helps keep things organized and fair for everyone." I could see the tension in her jaw, the tight grip on her emotions, as she realized this wasn't negotiable. Watching her struggle with the truth gave me a rush of quiet satisfaction. For the first time, I felt completely in control, asserting my rights without aggression, without chaos, without yelling. The plan I had nurtured in secret had worked flawlessly. By the end of the discussion, Mara had no choice but to comply. I felt a surge of empowerment, not from winning a battle, but from asserting boundaries with grace and strategy. My home was finally secure, and I knew I had proven, most importantly to myself, that I could stand firm and protect what was mine. Once the agreement was in place, I started enforcing it carefully. I assigned chores to Mara and her family, making it clear that everyone had to pitch in to keep the house running smoothly. I also asked for small rent contributions, framing it as a fair arrangement, and set strict schedules for shared spaces so no one could take liberties. At first, Mara and Jace grumbled quietly, exchanging frustrated looks while Finn and Lila complained about rules. I kept my tone calm, treating everything as routine rather than punishment. Each request, each instruction, was delivered matter-of-factly, leaving no room for argument. I noticed the small cracks forming in their composure. Mara started calling her parents, complaining about the chores, the money, the schedules. Her frustration was obvious, and yet she couldn't ignore that the house was functioning better than before. She was forced to follow the rules she had tried to dismiss. Meanwhile, my parents began to notice the tension. Dana asked questions about how things were going, and George admitted quietly that maybe I had more control than they had realized. I could hear their surprise in their voices, the first hint that they were beginning to respect my independence. They had underestimated me, and the realization was written clearly in every call I received. I felt a quiet satisfaction as the weeks went by. My home was no longer just a shelter, it was a place where my authority mattered. I had managed to assert my independence, protect my space, and make sure my family understood boundaries without losing civility. For the first time, I felt completely in charge. Mara's family might grumble and complain, but the rules were firm, and my position was unshakable. I had turned frustration into leverage, chaos into order, and betrayal into a controlled victory. A few weeks later, Dana and George came over, claiming they wanted to mediate and help smooth things out. I welcomed them politely, keeping my composure, but inside I was ready. As soon as they walked through the door, it was clear their plan had backfired. Mara was tense, her voice clipped, trying to argue over chores and schedules. Jace looked frustrated, and the kids were restless. Dana and George exchanged uneasy glances as they took in the scene. The house was orderly, tasks were being done, and yet their children were clearly uncomfortable and annoyed. They started to realize that their favoritism and interference had only caused tension instead of harmony. I spoke calmly, my tone steady. "I love our family, and I want us to get along," I said. "But I also need my space respected. Rules exist here for everyone's benefit, and boundaries aren't negotiable." My parents listened, surprised by how measured I sounded. They had expected anger or pleading, not this quiet firmness. Dana's eyes filled with a mix of guilt and recognition, and George nodded slowly, as if finally understanding the weight of their past control. Mara's jaw tightened, clearly frustrated that her usual tactics didn't work, and she couldn't argue against the clarity of my stance. For the first time, the room felt balanced. My parents admitted, in their own way, that I had grown into an independent adult capable of managing both responsibility and diplomacy. Mara, though irritated, had no choice but to comply, and even she began to respect the boundaries she had once ignored. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of relief. The house was no longer just a space I owned, it had become a symbol of my voice being heard and my autonomy being recognized. My family was starting to see me differently, and I finally felt fully seen. After weeks of careful effort, I finally felt a calm settle over my home. The tension that had once dominated every corner was easing. I had regained control, and my space felt truly mine again. Each room reflected the order and peace I had worked so hard to create, and it was a quiet victory that filled me with pride. The family dynamics had begun to shift in ways I hadn't dared hope for. Dana and George approached me differently now, listening without interrupting, offering suggestions instead of directives. The respect I had fought for was becoming real, tangible, and it warmed me in a way that nothing else had. Mara, too, had started to understand that her usual shortcuts and demands carried consequences. I could see it in the careful way she moved through the house, the restraint in her voice, and the subtle acknowledgement that I wasn't someone to be pushed around. Sitting alone one evening, I allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. The betrayal had stung more deeply than I could have imagined, and the anger that followed had driven me to strategize and defend my boundaries with precision. I realized that what had begun as frustration had transformed into strength, a strength I had nurtured quietly, without letting it consume me. I thought about how much I had learned about myself, how to stand firm, how to navigate conflict, and how to reclaim respect without losing my dignity. My independence was no longer just a concept, it was lived reality. Looking around my home, I finally felt a deep sense of belonging. This was my space, my rules, and my sanctuary. The house wasn't just a building anymore, it was a testament to the boundaries I had set, the challenges I had faced, and the person I had become. For the first time, I truly felt at home, completely, unapologetically, my way.